Hi, Dave Travis here again today. I'm actually in Dallas, Texas, and I'm talking with Tim Keller, who's in his office in New York City. Tim, so glad to have you again.
It's good to be with you, wherever we are.
Wherever we are.
I'm with you, but I'm not with you.
Exactly. Well, Tim, since you gave this talk in January of 2009, what's happened with Tim Keller?
Well, I'd say in the last, starting in 2009, I actually started about a 10-year transition plan to transition Redeemer away from me being the senior pastor. Basically about a 10-year plan. I'm about halfway through it. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's a whole lot easier just to preach and then just let them start a search committee and find somebody else. It's much more complicated, we think, for us. What we want to do is we want to create a network of churches out of Redeemer so that I'm handing off the reins, you might say, to a whole group of different pastors in a different sets, a whole series of different sized churches. So that's pretty big. That's worth more than a small answer here. It's worth a whole interview. But yeah, that's what we've been doing for the last, what I've been doing mainly for the last 5 years.
Well, you've been writing a lot of books too, I know, because I've seen a stream.
Oh, that.
Yeah, so there's been some of that. Well, tell me, I know you're involved and you helped start the Gospel Coalition, New York Leadership Center, Redeemer Church Planting Center. Any updates you want to give on any of those?
Well, and even the books, it's part of the transition plan. The transition plan is that it's my job, I think, to step away from being the leader of one church to being more of a help to the broader movement of churches, especially in New York, but also in great global cities in the world. So one of the ways to do that is to put what I've learned over the years into book form, which makes it durable and transferable. What I've done with Mac Peer and the New York Leadership Center in the last 5 years is we have sought to plant more churches in New York City and build up the ministry here. And the New York Church Planting, the Redeemer Church Planting Center, which is now called City to City, plants churches also in the great big global cities of the world, and I've been part of that. So that's the transition. The transition is to be more of a not an author speaker, but a trainer and leader of a church planting movements in the big cities of the world.
Fantastic. Now, the talk you gave back in 2009 was about failure in ministry and about not making an idol of our success. What have you learned since then?
I think, even though I don't have every word of that talk in my head right now, but I do know what I said, I think I would only say it a little louder now. I really do. I don't think I would change it much at all. I think there's a greater stress than ever on pastors to be all things to all people. My own son, I remember I walked with my son Michael, went through Gordon Conwell Seminary not too long ago. I went to Gordon Conwell Seminary. The seminary is actually very similar to the way, in many ways, it hasn't moved much, and I consider that good. It hasn't morphed into something else. So it was interesting for me to watch Michael take the courses. They were all largely the same courses I had, and I realized at the end of the time that Michael's MDiv, which is what I got 30, 40 years ago, does not equip him as well for ministry as mine did, not because it's a worse MDiv, but because I think the ministry world, or the world that we're ministering in, is much, much, much more complicated. And therefore, I think actually that in the past, most pastors went into existing churches that had been around for a long time, and you were a caretaker, you were kind of a chaplain, and you weren't as likely to fail. There wasn't as much on the line. Things were more static and stable, and things didn't change. And now there's enormous changes happen constantly, and the chances of failing actually are pretty good. And I think, therefore, you're going to have to work on your heart. You're going to have to realize my ministry is not about that. It's not how I judge myself, not with the metrics. You cannot live and die by the attendance numbers. You can't. So everything I'm saying, I said 5 years ago, I would say a little louder now, I think.
Great. Any other encouragement you have for our viewers and listeners and those who will watch this?
Well, especially if you're working in North America. Now, I'm very much a friend of people who are working in other cities around the world, but especially if you're working in North America, I don't think ministers have ever been more useful, except maybe in the very beginning when churches were just getting started in the country. We're living in a more secular age. It's a more hostile age. It's more difficult to be understood and make yourself understood. I think there's more spiritual and economic and psychological needs. So I think it takes more ingenuity. I think it's more challenging. I think it's more exciting. I also think that just preaching the gospel is more unique and useful than it used to be. And so I can't think of a better job, actually, though I do think it's a lot harder than it used to be.
Absolutely. Well, thanks to Tim Keller. Let's all watch his talk now.